The workshop lights flickered frenetically that night, and the sound of tools falling echoed in the empty space. Juan, a millionaire disguised as a mechanic, heard a distant laugh, but when he turned, there was no one, just him and the shadows. 2 nights in the workshop, and the feeling of being watched became unbearable. Something or someone was with him, and the secret he came to investigate was deeper than he imagined. This can't be happening, he whispered to himself. But it was. Juan Alcázar, a man who had built his empire in the automotive sector, always felt that his wealth isolated him from reality. He wanted to know how his employees lived, how they thought. But this was just the facade of his curiosity. The real reason for disguising himself as a mechanic was to investigate the mysterious death of a former employee of a remote workshop located in the small town of Xochitepec, Mexico. On his first day, upon arriving at the workshop, he was greeted by Santiago, the owner of the place, a man with a suspicious look and scars that seemed to tell dark stories. Santiago, with a half-smile. "Are you sure you want to work here? This workshop, it is different." Juan, looking around, relaxed. "Different how? I need the money and I know how to fix engines, so what's the problem?" Santiago, staring at him intently. "Problems aren't with the cars, my friend, but don't worry. You'll see with your own eyes." That first night, Juan ignored Santiago's words, but little did he know that the real reason for his disguise was about to reveal itself in a way he never imagined. 2 days later, while fixing an old truck, Juan began to hear whispers behind him. When he turned around, he saw a shadowy figure at the back of the workshop. He walked over there, and a locked door that Santiago had told him to not worry about seemed to vibrate. Juan, murmuring to himself, confused, "What the hell? What's behind that door?" That night, while the workshop tools seemed to move on their own, Juan realized he was about to uncover a dark secret. He approached the door that vibrated slightly, feeling a cold shiver run through his body. Santiago, who was at the back of the workshop, suddenly appeared. Santiago, calm but with a serious tone, "I told you not to worry about that door. It's not something you want to understand." Juan, facing Santiago, determined, "You're hiding something here. I know there's more than just old engines and rusty parts." Santiago, laughing softly, darkly, "You think this is just an ordinary workshop? Juan, some things can't be fixed, not even by you." That same night, while working late alone, Juan again heard the whispers that seemed to come from within the walls. This time he decided to ignore Santiago's warning and grabbed a wrench to force the lock of the closed door. A mysterious voice behind him, cold and whispering, "You shouldn't open that door." Juan turned around sharply, but the hallway was empty. His breathing became heavy and he felt something was wrong. However, driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, he finally managed to open the door. Inside, an icy air enveloped him. In the center of the room there was an old table with scattered tools, but more disturbing were the old photos of people Juan had never seen, all pinned to the walls with rusty nails. And on the floor, handprints, as if someone or something had tried to get out of there. Suddenly, Santiago appeared again at the entrance with a grim expression. Santiago, almost whispering, "Now you have opened the door, and they will come for you too." Juan was paralyzed by Santiago's sinister presence. The cold from the room seemed to invade his skin, but it was Santiago's gaze that made his stomach turn. Something about that man was not normal. Juan, nervous, gripping the wrench tightly. "What is this? Who are these people? What's happening here?" Santiago, staring at him with a cold look. "These people were like you. They came here thinking they could change something, but they ended up getting lost. This workshop is not just metal and oil, Juan. It holds secrets, souls that cannot rest." Juan felt the air getting heavier. He slowly backed away as shadows seemed to grow on the walls of the room. The photos on the walls began to move. The eyes in the portraits seemed to follow him. The sound of dragging chains began to echo throughout the workshop. Juan, shouting, trying to hide his fear, This is madness. What did you do to them? Santiago approached, his voice becoming deeper and more distorted. Santiago, with a dark smile. I did nothing. They made their choices. Now it's your turn. You shouldn't have opened the door. Now there's no turning back. Suddenly a loud noise echoed through the workshop, as if something had fallen violently. Juan looked around and the shadows in the room began to take shape, moving toward him. They were nebulous figures with empty eyes, carrying the pain and despair of their deaths. He tried to run, but the door he had opened slammed shut behind him. One of the shadows approached, whispering in his ear. Shadow, soft and haunting voice. You will be next. Juan fell to his knees, gasping as the truth hit him. That workshop was not just an ordinary workplace. It was a portal to something much more sinister, and now he was trapped in its center. Juan felt the weight of despair. The shadows circled around him, whispering their secrets and carrying a sense of impending death. He stood up with difficulty, his breathing heavy, fear dominating his thoughts. Santiago's words echoed in his mind. Now there's no turning back. But Juan was not ready to give up. He had come there to unravel a mystery, and he would not allow supernatural forces to defeat him. Juan, whispering to himself while observing the shadows, No, I will get out of here no matter what these things are. He knew that somehow those souls were trapped there. Maybe if he could find the source of their imprisonment, he could free them and save himself. Around the room he noticed symbols etched into the walls, old and worn, like marks from a dark ritual. Maybe that room was not just a storage space, but a place where something terrible had been sealed. With a burst of courage, he approached the wall and ran his fingers over one of the symbols. Shadow, whispering in his ear, You cannot free us, you are destined to join us. Juan, ignoring the warning, began to rub the symbols with a dirty cloth he found on the floor, trying to erase the mark. As he did this, the shadows began to scream, as if they were being hurt. But as he continued, Santiago entered the room again, this time with a look of fury. Santiago shouting, Stop! You don't know what you're doing! Juan staring at Santiago, determined. These souls are trapped here because of you, aren't they? I won't let you continue with this. The floor began to shake, and one of the shadows advanced on Juan, trying to grab him. But he, in a desperate act, grabbed one of the old screwdrivers from the table and drove it into the symbol on the floor. The shadows screamed in agony, and a faint light began to shine in the room. Juan, determined, I will get out of here, and these souls will too. Santiago, realizing he was losing control of the situation, took a few steps back, now visibly scared. Santiago, in a low tone, You don't understand. If you free one of them, all will be freed. And what comes with them is something even I cannot control. The shadows around Juan thrashed violently, as if being pulled by an invisible force. The symbol on the floor that he had pierced with the screwdriver began to shine with a blinding light, and the screams of the trapped souls echoed throughout the workshop. The air was charged with electricity, and Juan's fear mixed with his determination. Santiago, now in panic, tried to regain control of the situation. Santiago shouting, trying to reach Juan, You have no idea what you're unleashing. These souls are not innocent. You will bring evil into this world. But Juan, ignoring Santiago's desperation, knew he could not turn back. If those souls had been trapped there for so long, there was a chance that their release might be his only salvation. He then forced the symbol to break completely. When he did, the shadows began to dissolve one by one into a cold wind that seemed to carry their screams away. Juan shouting back at Santiago, You kept them trapped for too long. I won't let you continue with this. Suddenly the workshop floor began to crack, revealing a deep dark fissure that seemed to swallow the entire room. One last shadow emerged from the crack, larger, more menacing, an entity that did not seem to have a human form. It was the evil Santiago had warned about, an ancient dark spirit with eyes that glowed like embers. Santiago, with fear in his eyes, backing away. You shouldn't have done this. This is not an ordinary soul, it's what I was trying to keep sealed. The entity advanced toward Juan, the air around it growing heavier. Juan, panting and not knowing what else to do, held the screwdriver tightly. But surprisingly, the entity did not attack him. Instead, it turned toward Santiago, who began to scream. Santiago pleading, "No, I did everything you asked. I kept the workshop as your prison." But it was too late. The entity with a swift movement enveloped Santiago in dense shadows, silencing his screams within seconds. And then, as if being sucked back into the void, the entity disappeared along with Santiago, leaving the workshop in a deadly silence. Juan stood frozen, speechless, his heart pounding as the fissure in the floor slowly closed as if nothing had happened. The workshop was immersed in a deep silence. The light from the lamps flickered, but there were no more screams, whispers, or shadows. Juan, still panting and sweating, looked around, trying to process everything that had just happened. Santiago and the entity had vanished, and with them all the supernatural weight that enveloped the place. He walked slowly through the workshop, now deserted and strangely ordinary, as if the horrors he had witnessed had never happened. The tools were in place, and the walls that once held the sinister photographs were now empty. Juan, murmuring to himself, Did I really end this?" The feeling of relief mixed with the exhaustion overtaking his body. He knew that somehow he had managed to free the souls that had been trapped there for so long, but he had also released an entity that Santiago, for decades, had tried to keep contained. What did this mean for the world? He didn't know. As he exited through the front door of the workshop, the warm night breeze greeted him. The small town of Xochitepec seemed quieter than ever, but Juan couldn't stop thinking about Santiago's last words, about the evil he had inadvertently released. Looking at the horizon, Juan realized that although he had faced something beyond comprehension, there was a clear lesson in all of this. It wasn't just about money, power, or mysteries. It was about the consequences of tampering with the unknown. He looked one last time at the workshop, now an ordinary and harmless building. Juan, thinking aloud, "Some doors are better left unopened." And with that, Juan walked away from the workshop, determined never to return, but knowing that the truth of that place would haunt him forever. Months had passed since the last time Juan was at the workshop. He had returned to his life in Guadalajara, resuming his role as a successful businessman. However, something in his soul had changed forever. The shine of his millionaire life, once so fascinating, now seemed empty. He kept the secret of that night buried, never telling anyone what happened. But on silent nights when the wind blew through the windows of his mansion, Juan could still hear the echoes of the whispers he heard in that workshop. The voices that tormented him seemed to want something more, something he did not know how to fulfill. One day, while opening the mail in his office, he found an envelope with no return address. Inside there was a single handwritten phrase, "You may have escaped, but we always find a door." Juan let the paper fall from his hands, his heart racing. The evil he had unleashed was still lurking. He had left the workshop, but he would never completely escape what he had done. From now on, he would live with one foot in the world of the living and the other in the world of shadows, always expecting that one day what was unleashed would return to claim him. He knew that some doors should never be opened, but once opened they can never be closed again.